Okay, so here's how we get the equations. If I want the hypotenuse, right? So I'm going to use this one function. I'm going to say, okay, well, times h. So this is kind of what we did yesterday. So the opposite side equals the hypotenuse times the sine of the angle. Well, what if I want, instead of the opposite, what if I want the hypotenuse? Well, I would have brought the hypotenuse over here, just doing algebra, and then divide by the sine. And divide this side by the sine. Again, just algebra stuff. But that gives me a different equation where I would have the hypotenuse equals the opposite divided by the sine of the angle. Right? So there's two equations I need. Do the same thing here, right? Same thing here, times hypotenuse. So the adjacent equals the hypotenuse times, now it's cosine of the angle. But I could do the opposite, like same thing I did over here. I'm just doing different algebra steps. So I multiply by the hypotenuse. That would cancel. And then I would divide by the cosine. Divide this side by the cosine. So that would give me the hypotenuse equals the adjacent divided by cosine of the angle. Again, try to stay with me. Like all this stuff will make sense once I give you the equations. Same thing here with the tangent. The opposite would equal, multiply by a on both sides, and I would get adjacent times tangent of the angle. But again, if I do that same thing, times a, cancel that, then divide by t, I would get adjacent equals opposite divided by the tangent. Okay, so now we have all 6 equations here. How are we going to use them? If I want to find the adjacent, this is the way I would do it. If I want to find the adjacent side, that's the side I'm looking for, I either have to use this one or this one, right? So adjacent either equals the hypotenuse times the cosine of the angle, or it equals the opposite divided by the tangent of an angle. Okay, so I did those two. If I'm looking for the opposite, sorry about that. So again, adjacent either equals hypotenuse times the cosine of an angle, or opposite divided by the tangent of the angle. Opposite would equal the hypotenuse times the sine of an angle. Or opposite equals the adjacent times the tangent of an angle. Okay, gets rid of those two equations. And then finally, if I'm looking for the hypotenuse, 2 more equations. Hypotenuse equals opposite divided by the sine of an angle, or hypotenuse equals adjacent divided by the cosine of an angle. Right? So all I need to do is figure out, what am I looking for and what do I have? Right? I'm going to have one of these sides. I'm going to be looking for one side and I'm going to have another side. And I just got to pick which one I want. Right? So that should be pretty easy.